today, because as you can see, we are in a different space, because today we're going to be working on a special recipe. Well, you know, it's the month of September, and September always makes me think of apples. And I thought it would be really fun for us to work on a recipe that involves apples. Now, in my last video about apple facts, the third chapter was dedicated to foods that were made from apples. There was apple juice, apple sauce, apple pie. That got me to thinking about a special recipe I always do every year with my students. It's probably one of the most tasty ways to eat apple, because we're going to be taking apples plus pizza. I know you love apples and I know you love pizza. Let's put the two together, and we're going to be experiencing a very different and delicious, new to you probably, apple recipe. So this recipe for sure you're going to need an adult to help you, because we're going to be using the oven today, and we're going to be using a knife. Well, a knife has to be used in order to prep the apples. So definitely you're going to need some help in the kitchen for this one. Now, as we get started and you're working on a recipe, the most important thing you have to do before you start is you have to gather the materials. So there are utensils that are going to be needed, not very many. And so you're going to gather the utensils. Make sure you have all of those things so that as you're working on your recipe, you don't have to stop and say, oh no, I don't have this. So we'll name off all of the utensils you're going to need, and then all of the special ingredients. This is a pretty basic and easy recipe, and it's very simple to follow. So let me show you what you're going to need, and then you can go gather. You're going to need a cookie sheet, a large one. I've got a small one here just because I'm going to do just a little sampler of this apple pizza to show you. So if you're making several of these, you're going to have a larger cookie sheet. And of course, you're going to want to spray the cookie sheet with some oil. Again, getting an adult to help you will be great. You're going to need some bowls, some tiny little bowls or paper plates, and then some spoons, not very many. As we go through, you'll see how many you need. So get a few items together. Now, I like to build my apple pizza on a paper plate. So you can do that. If you have some waxed paper at your house, that's really great to prep on too. Now, here are the special ingredients. You're going to need biscuits. We have to have the pizza dough. Hello. Now, this recipe calls for grand biscuits. You're going to want grand biscuits because these are really tasty, dependable biscuits, and they're large. You're going to need a large pizza dough. So grand biscuits. Now I was able to get a little small pack. They come in 8 packs too. You're going to need some type of butter or margarine, just a smidge. I've got a little bit of flour here. I'm going to be sprinkling that on my plate before I start working with my pizza dough. You need, my favorite apples, you know, are Granny Smith. And for this recipe, the Granny Smith are really the best because they're a little bit tart and you're going to be adding some sweetness. However, if you want to trade off and get a different flavor apple, feel free to do that. That can be up to you. You're going to need some brown sugar. The brown sugar is going to be the sweetener for that green apple. Now just say at your house you only had white sugar, that would be fine too. Just work with what you have, but you need something to sweeten up the apples, the tart apples. You need this fresh smelling spice, cinnamon, And then this is the secret sauce. You're going to need some shredded cheddar cheese. Of course, people always say, are you kidding? Are you putting shredded cheddar cheese on apples and brown sugar? Sounds weird, but this is the secret sauce. And then for your apples, you're gonna need, and I just took a Granny Smith, cut it up, peeled it, and then chopped it up. You can get these apple pieces, small or large, whatever. I just kind of chunked them up. Now, here's another choice. A couple years ago, a friend of mine who was a teacher friend, she said, why don't we use canned apples on our recipe? If you use these, they're already sweetened, so you could probably skip the brown sugar and possibly the cinnamon, because this is what they put in apple pie. And you would just cut these up. You would just put these on top, spread them around. And so that's another tip. So you're gonna have to gather those ingredients, the utensils, and then you have to gather these ingredients. So as you're gathering, I'm gonna start the process. Now, while you're gathering, before I start working on my recipe, the number one thing you have to do before you start working on this recipe, after you gather everything and organize it, you have to wash your hands, because you're prepping food, people are going to be eating it. So I'm going to step over here, wash my hands, and you go gather. I'm going to dry my hands. I'm back. Hopefully you had time to go get your ingredients and meet me back here in the kitchen. All right, I'm going to start with my paper plate and just a smidge of flour. I'm going to sprinkle the flour on the plate, because when I'm working with my biscuit dough, when you're working with this dough, it can get a little sticky. So the flour just kind of dries it up and lets you work with it without it sticking to your fingers so much. Now, I could have opened this and possibly should have, but I love to hear the pop of a biscuit. Just like that. I love to hear that pop. You probably saw my startled face, and I actually, one of these popped out, which is fine. I can throw that away later, because I'm only going to need one to show you. So look at the size of this biscuit. It's kind of small, but we're gonna stretch it. So step number one for this recipe, put it in the plate, and then you're gonna be pressing it down. You're gonna sort of like kneading the dough. Kneading the dough means that you're working with the dough, and we wanna push it. So I always tell my students, they're gonna press and push. You don't wanna get it too thin, but you do want it to spread out. And when you're working with a recipe, you've got to have some space to work, so have a good counter space here. And of course, when you put dough in the oven, it has an ingredient in it called yeast, and so it's going to rise up, it's going to fluff up and bake up. So you want a nice flat surface, and you want to spread it out. Okay, there's your pizza dough. Mamma mia, your pizza dough. Okay, step number two, just a smidge. If you're using spreadable butter, you just get a little bit. I've got a little fancy knife, and you're gonna spread it around. Now, sometimes with margarine or butter, it's kind of, it's cold if it's been in the refrigerator. So it's fine if you just even put it on in a little plop. Go. So there is step two. So we've got our dough all kneaded. We've got our butter for flavor. Now, the next thing, I'm going to put on those apples. So I like the fresh apples. And So I want to spread those on. And I'm going to just put them like that. I don't need to get them too close to the edge. I want a little pizza crust, right? Okay, now I'm going to take some brown sugar. You don't need a lot. I've got a little spoon here. So I'm gonna spoon it on, or if you want, you can lift it with your fingers and you can just pinch and sprinkle. That's what we used to do in the classroom. We'd give everybody a little cup of it and they could just sprinkle. I'm gonna sprinkle it around. Remember, we wanna get it on the apples to make the Granny Smith, the tart apples sweet. We're going to, and the apples, the biscuit, the butter, and the apples are the first 3 steps. And then these last 3 ingredients you can put on really in any order. You can put the brown sugar, the cinnamon, and the cheese, because when it goes in the oven, it's all gonna melt together. So I'm gonna go ahead and sprinkle. Now, this is a little tricky because you don't wanna get too much cinnamon. So I always told my students to tilt and then tap and kind of just sprinkle around. And if there's an ingredient that we're putting on here that you don't prefer to be on there, then you can trade it off, you can take it off. And then finally, the cheese. I'm gonna get a pinch of cheese. This is kind of an informal recipe, so a pinch of cheese. Sprinkle, remember this is the secret sauce, even though it kind of sounds weird, it really is delicious. And there we are, all the ingredients in one space. Now, we're gonna transfer it to the cookie sheet. Now the biscuit dough, here's the part of the recipe that's kind of interesting for me because I've always done this at school and I was able to take my big cafeteria trays to the cafeteria and the cafeteria ladies cooked it for me. So they always had the right temperature on their oven and the right timing because they were the experts. So I'm just gonna go by what the biscuit dough says, and we're crossing our fingers that with all the pizza ingredients, it all works out. And I'm gonna be peeking in the oven. Again, here's where an adult is gonna come in handy. The directions on this can say, heat the oven to 375. That means it has to be preheated. And my oven is ready to go. It's preheated. And then you're gonna place your biscuits on the tray. And then it says to cook 11 to 15 minutes. So you're gonna need a little timer or to set the oven timer. So I'm gonna transfer this to, I'm just gonna slide it over. Oh, it just slid on there ever so wonderfully. Then I'll be popping these in the oven in just a minute. I'm gonna make a few more, and then I'm gonna pop them in the oven, and then we're going to wait for deliciousness. All right, let me put a pause on. I'm gonna make some more, and we will continue in a few. All right, we are ready to go in the oven. And I did make one of my biscuits, apple pizzas. One of those 4 has the apple pie filling on it, which I have never tried, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, the oven is doing its job. Now, while we're waiting, let's just review those steps. So first you're going to gather your materials, utensils, and ingredients. Then you're going to get your station, everything all set up. The first thing you're going to be doing is pressing down the dough. And you're going to put that buttery spread on. And then you're going to spread your apples on, number 2. And then you're going to add your brown sugar to sweeten it up, pinch of that. a sprinkle of cinnamon. And remember, we said the brown sugar and the cinnamon and the cheese can all be, you can do it in any order. That's fine. And then a pinch of cheese, secret sauce of deliciousness. And this is a picture of some former students taking that big tray down with the apple pizzas. And the cool thing about doing it at school, everybody made one, it was exciting, and we all had to put our name on the cookie sheet paper. The final thing we're gonna get to do, which is coming up next, is eat and enjoy. That's the delicious part. So while we're waiting, you know, you can go ahead and tidy up, be putting your, all of your things that need to go back into the cupboard. Mom and you, or whoever's helping you, grandma or a family member, can be putting all your refrigerated items back in the refrigerator. This is a great fall activity that you can do with your family. That's a fun thing. You can do it for a special event, like don't even rule out Thanksgiving. This could be instead of pumpkin pie or apple pie. Your family might start a new tradition of making apple pizzas. Hey, and if you're having a sleepover, you're having a camp out, you're having some kind of a party, celebration, this can be a great fun kids activity for you and your friends. It's easy, doesn't cost a lot, and it really is delicious. Okay, we're gonna wait for those pizzas and then we'll bite into deliciousness. All right, I'm gonna put you on pause and we'll be back for tasting party.